Hello, History 363. So today when we think about Rome and the mastery of Italy, we're going to be talking about infrastructures of control. In my last video lecture, I gave a kind of blow-by-blow of the Romans beating various people, beating the Samnites in the Samnite Wars, also subduing a number of Etruscan communities to the north, particularly during the Third Samnite War, which is also in part a war against the Etruscans. One thing about warfare is it's not enough just to beat the enemy. You need, in order to be sort of successful as a conqueror, which Rome is, you need not just to beat them, but to find, again, to develop infrastructures that actually allow you to make that dominance permanent. Indeed, that's something that Rome had lacked in early Roman warfare. Let's say our sources are actually correct. The Romans routinely beat back the Aequi and the Volsci and the Etruscans to the north, but it's kind of irrelevant. The Romans clearly never assert dominance or control over those groups, and so Roman territory remains the same size and Roman power remains relatively modest and mediocre. But that changes as the Romans move into Italy more broadly. They develop infrastructures of control that allow them to govern and exploit Italy, and subsequently use the resources of Italy, particularly the manpower of Italy, to conquer the Mediterranean. So let's go ahead and start talking first about physical infrastructure. Italy is a hard place to control. It's deeply mountainous, and the Apennines parse it again to a lot of different districts, which make it difficult to move soldiers through. There is a reason that Italy has only been unified twice in the history of the Italian peninsula, by the Romans and then in the 19th century, the creation of the modern Italian nation state. And Italy is a very, very hard place to move armies through. If you know, say, the history of World War II in Italy, it was a brutal, desperate slog as British and American armies fought their way north up the spine of the Apennine Mountains against the Germans. So in places where the terrain works against you, infrastructure matters. And this is the importance of the Romans building roads. So the first road, which we mentioned in the last lecture, is built in the context of the Second Samnite War. And it's built by actually one of the first Roman political figures who has a kind of realistic and believable personality, and that is Appius Claudius. So Appius Claudius, the censor, sometimes known as Appius Claudius Caecus, Appius Claudius the Blind, is a patrician. He's from the gens Claudia. And he is censor in 312 BC and subsequently afterwards elected consul. By the later standards of how Roman career hierarchies work, that's a little odd, but things may still be working themselves out in the late 4th century BC. And his big achievement as censor, well, there's a couple of big achievements, but one of them is the construction of the Reea Appia, the Appian Way, which, as I mentioned last lecture, runs from Rome down to Capua. And this road is important, again, because it allows Roman armies to move very quickly into Campania and subsequently from Campania to launch attacks into Samnium. So this is, again, part of the infrastructure of control. Rome isn't maintaining huge occupying armies all over Italy. They still have, remember, a citizen militia. So they have to if there's a war, they got to levy a bunch of soldiers at the start of the campaign, form them into legions, and then quickly move them into whatever part of Italy is the war zone. So this is where roads really matter. The Reea Appia is just the start of a series of Roman roads that eventually will spread all over Italy. The Reea Appia itself eventually extends to Brundisium, and as you can actually see, there's a whole network that allows Roman armies to move across the peninsula with relative ease. Now, I should note, most of these roads are not paved like the picture you see in their entirety. So while they are paved oftentimes close to the city, so if you go to Rome, you can see some of the original pavement of the Via Appia, or at least pavement that dates back to antiquity. It may not be the original stuff that Appius Claudius Caecus was contracting to have laid down. But most of it is going to simply be broad tracks that are cleared, graded, and frequently marked with milestones. But in many instances, if you see the roads on that picture, we don't know the exact path. We know some of the cities that they went through. We know where they started, ended, but they were not necessarily sort of paved highways. They were what you might sort of see if you go hiking, a kind of dirt utility road, but nonetheless a road that is cleared, marked, known, and armies can very quickly use it to move across Italy. So roads, all roads lead to Rome. It is true that physical infrastructure is very important for ensuring Roman control over the peninsula. Now, there's one other bit of physical infrastructure that Appius Claudius is keenly involved in, and this is an aqueduct. He builds the first aqueduct that the Aqua Appia that leads water up from the sort of highlands of these sort of Apennine foothills down to Rome. And this isn't necessarily part of the infrastructure of control, but it does suggest that the city itself has a growing population and therefore needs additional water supply. And it also goes to show that these infrastructures are interconnected. The same guy who's building the road that the Roman army can move quickly on is also contracting an aqueduct. This aqueduct probably does not look like the classic Roman aqueducts that have the sort of the columns and the arches. It's mostly a set of tunnels and canals that sort of link an underground spring to Rome. Although eventually the Romans will build those kind of canonical aqueducts that you mostly now see in Spain. So we have physical infrastructure, and that certainly matters. Equally important are colonies, and I mentioned colonization as something that the Romans are doing as an outcome of these wars. But I think we should see colonization as part of our infrastructure of control. So the Romans are sending out colonies. Frequently, these are colonies of veterans. The standard size of a colony, by the time we get sort of decent historical records, is anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000. So you're sending out a colony. Again, this benefits Rome in multiple ways. One, the colony itself acts as a garrison. It's not a full-time permanent garrison because these guys are spending most of their time farming the land grants that they're given when they move to the colony. But the fact that, in simply defending their own farms, they acts as a garrison of pro-Romans out there in various parts of Italy. It also is a part of Rome's broader military manpower package, in that, in many instances, it's taking poor Romans, giving them land, making them eligible for military service as assidui, or at the very least, taking the sons of assidui, who, if there's, say, 2 or 3 brothers, they would break their father's plot up so small that each subsequent plot, when they inherit, would not qualify them to serve in the Roman army. But if 1 or 2 of them goes to a colony, then he's taken care of, and the plot doesn't have to be fragmented as much. So that's good for not only Rome's social sort of stability back at home and economic equality, but it also improves the manpower pool. The colonists are assidui, and also maybe some of the people left at home are assidui because they're not crowded out of their peasant holdings. So that's good. Also, the colonists themselves can get mobilized into Roman armies. So again, this works all around their garrisons, their pools of manpower, and the Romans definitely lay colonies down as they fight. This is really critical. in that they are thinking about key places that they can plop contingents down. And if you look at Samnium, over the course of the Second and Third Samnite Wars, a ring of colonies gets put around Samnium. And the most important one, which is actually a supersized colony, it may have as many as 20,000 adult male colonists, although we only have that from a literary source. And you can see that's in the south. That's sort of anchoring Samnium, preventing the Samnites from necessarily coordinating with other Oscan-speaking peoples in the south of Italy. And so there you actually have, the Romans are beating the Samnites in battle. They're besieging Samnites' towns, but the way that they're keeping the Samnites down permanently has to do with the fact that they've now got this ring of colonies around them that's really going to constrict and contain their whatever action they have going forward. So we have roads that allow Roman armies to move. We have colonies that garrison Italy, that augment Rome's military manpower. But one real key aspect of the infrastructure of control is legal infrastructure. And we really should think of laws actually as a form of infrastructure. Maybe it's an abstract infrastructure, but oftentimes when political scientists talk about states having infrastructural power, one of the key things they're thinking about is law, sort of frameworks that allow governance to take place without just sort of, without having to rely on the medium of brute nomination. And here, Roman legal frameworks are really critical. For one thing, legal frameworks provide a spectrum of statuses that tie various Italian groups in to the Roman project. They also, because there's so many different statuses, and this is actually very common with empires. Empires oftentimes have a lot of little different statuses and little different gradations in status, and that's actually one way of breaking people up, because certain people, we have a privilege that you don't. Well, we wouldn't want to actually coordinate with you to rebel because we could lose our privilege. We don't need to rebel. We're already better than you. And so empires like to do this, and the Romans are no different. In fact, they have, again, when we think about the legal infrastructure, what's notable is how many statuses there are. And so that different Italians, even if they live right next door to one another, may have a very different set of rights and obligations. And that makes it only more difficult for them to necessarily coordinate with one another if for some reason they're unhappy with the state of affairs of being under Rome's thumb. So the first status, and perhaps we might think the highest status, is full Roman citizenship. Civitas optimo iure. And if you are a full Roman citizen, you have a whole package of rights. That right might include provocatio, if you're in the immediate vicinity of the city of Rome. It in particular includes the right to vote. That's perhaps the most politically important and assertive right for most Roman citizens. You can vote in Roman elections, and we'll talk about the mechanics of voting in Roman elections next week. You also, if you so choose, if you have the money and the wherewithal, you can run for Roman office. So the right to vote is, for the Romans, suffragium. That's where we get our modern English word suffrage. It has nothing to do with suffering. It's derived from the Latin word for the right to vote, the franchise, suffragium. And if you have the right to run for office, is the jus honorum, the right of offices. So those are kind of the obvious political rights that come with full Roman citizenship. Now, where there are rights, there are also obligations. One of the most prominent obligation is military service. You have to serve in Roman armies. And this maybe might say the most important obligation, because the Romans have a large citizen body, and by the time we get to the 3rd century, they're mobilizing large armies. First to fight in Italy, again, there may be around 60,000 mobilized for Sanctinum, and then eventually to fight in the Mediterranean. Another related obligation is to pay the war tax, tributum. This is an obligation that citizens have. And so every year that there's a war, you have the tributum is levied based on what money is needed to fund the armies. And you then have to pay a kind of property tax. Tributum is levied a certain percentage of the valuation of your property. So another big obligation, the serving in the army and paying tributum, paying taxes, those are two of the big obligations of Roman citizenship. You also have a couple of key sort of civic rights, in addition to the political rights. One is the right to produce other Roman citizens through legitimate marriage under Roman law. This is, again, I mentioned it last time, connubium. So if you marry another, a full citizen and full citizen, they both just naturally have connubium. And because that is a legal marriage under Roman law, the children have Roman citizenship. Whereas if it's not a legal Roman marriage, the citizenship status would go through the mother. So if a Roman soldier abroad fathers a child with a woman who doesn't have the right of connubium, that's not that the child isn't a Roman citizen. It takes its status from the mother rather than the father. Connubium, an important right when given how important marriage and subsequent inheritance is to just how the Romans move their property. The other right is commercium, the right to engage in commercial activity, in contracts that are covered by Roman law. And so also important if you want to be able to use the Roman court system to have a commercial contract enforced. So again, we have a spectrum of rights and obligations, and that's full citizenship. Again, there's a lot desirable there, although there are some real burdens, particularly military service and tributum. The enfranchisement to full Roman citizenship, again, early on, at times it's a bit of a punishment. When the Latins get full citizenship, and in 330, when they were annexed at the end of the Latin War, this is kind of a bit of a punishment. They're rather than having their own communities, they're effectively annexed. That being said, particularly as the Romans exert their control over Italy and the Mediterranean, and particularly as elites realize the potential payoff of a successful career in Rome, full Roman citizenship is something that communities want, and indeed usually is a reward for good service, even if maybe in the early 4th century it's still seen as a bit of a punishment. Now, just below full citizenship is something the Romans call citizenship without the vote, civitas sine suffragio. So it has none of the political benefits of being a full citizen. You cannot run for office, and you do not have, as the name implies, civitas sine suffragio, you do not have the right to vote, citizenship without the vote. So you can't vote in Roman elections. The burdens are still there, military service and paying tributum. One benefit is you also have those kind of civic or civil rights. You have the right of connubium, so someone who is a civis sine suffragio can marry a full Roman citizen, and their children will be citizens. Likewise, commercium. So that also can be a benefit if you are trading with Roman citizens, and you can create contracts that are recognized under Roman law. Which, again, those are more stable than contracts that are acknowledged as existing but are less stable outside of Roman law if you actually want to get redress. So that's one knockdown. Again, oftentimes, civitas sine suffragio is assigned to conquered communities, and again, it may initially be almost a little bit of a punishment. We conquered you. We are doing away with your own internal governance structures, although many Civitates sine suffragio, many communities, cities without the vote, do maintain some of their internal structures for local affairs. So they may still elect local magistrates and hold local assemblies to manage their local affairs, but they still, for overall foreign policy, taxation, military affairs, are directly controlled by Rome. So initially it might be a bit of a punishment, and again, oftentimes non-Latin speaking peoples who are annexed are assigned this status. That being said, many, and eventually probably all, communities sine suffragio are promoted to full citizenship, oftentimes after about a generation or so. Sometimes it takes longer, so there are a number of Volscian communities that are annexed at the end of the Second Samnite Wars. Like Arpinum is annexed sine suffragio, and in 188 BC it is promoted to full citizenship. But the promotions do happen. The next set of status is Latin status, the Latin rights. And the Latin rights, the Jus Latinum, are essentially the rights that had existed amongst the Latin community, sometimes referred to as the Latin League, where basically people moving from different communities had a set of kind of reciprocal rights. So you could settle in one community, move from one community or another. Key rights, as I discussed last lecture, connubium and commercium, because each city is small, you'd be able to marry and trade with the other Latin communities. When the Romans defeat the Latins at the end of the Latin War, again, they annex directly most of those Latin communities directly into the Roman citizen body, save for 3 which had sat out the revolt. Those continue to enjoy these kind of reciprocal Latin statuses. That being said, when the Romans send out colonies, there's a problem. They're sending these Roman citizens quite far afield, and it really is impossible for them to participate in the political life of the city of Rome. How can they vote when they're way off over the Apennine Mountains? So the Romans say, when you go and move to this colony, you are going to give up your Roman citizenship. But we will make the inhabitants, anyone who settles in this colony, since we want people to go to these colonies, they're an important part of how we control Italy, we're going to assign to you the package of rights that had previously been shared by this old Latin League. So if you move to a Latin colony, you have connubium, you can marry a Roman citizen, and the children will be Roman citizens. You have commercium, so you can take part in contracts with Romans and have those contracts honored under Roman law. Good news, if you move to a Latin community, you don't have to pay taxes to Rome. Latins do not owe tributum. Although, when the Romans say, we need you to send a contingent of troops, the Romans aren't going to pay those troops. The community has to pay the troops. So you may have to pay your own internal taxes to fund the military contingents, the cohorts that Rome demands. And also, if you are in Rome on election day, Latins can vote in Roman elections. They're randomly assigned to a voting unit. Again, we'll talk about how the Romans vote, but they actually can cast a vote in Roman elections. And at least for a time, although this becomes contested in the 2nd century BC, if you are in a Latin colony and you move back to Rome, you can regain your Roman citizenship. So Latin status, again, is a pretty high status. It has a lot of the benefits of Roman citizenship. And again, it's because it's a package of kind of nice rights that are associated with Roman citizenship. It's given to encourage people to move to these colonies. Hey, look, you're not giving up all that much if you go and settle in Venusia, because you will still have a Latin status and you'll still have a lot of the nice things about Roman citizenship. You can't, however, if you're a Latin, run for office in Rome. You can run for office in your own community, which may allow you to be kind of, big fish, small pond. Outside of that, outside of those, again, gradated sort of forms of citizenship and kind of what we might kind of call half citizenship, you are simply a foreigner. So if you're like the Samnites, you're defeated by the Romans. Your rights and responsibilities vis-a-vis Rome are determined by the treaty, the foedus, that the Romans sign with you at the end of the war. Depending on how that war ends, Rome may basically determine what rights you have. The form of warfare that the Romans like to impose involves something called the deditio, unconditional surrender, where the defeated enemy says everything that we have, every person, every animal, every field, every farm, every building, we give to Rome. We surrender unconditionally. Usually the Romans say, thank you for giving us everything you have, including your persons. We're going to be nice. We're going to give it all back to you under the following conditions. And then those conditions are dictated by Rome. So if you're not a Latin, or if you don't have the Civitas Suffragio or full citizenship, what you have is a set of rights and responsibilities determined by the treaty you sign with Rome. So it can vary. So again, one Italian community can have certain rights that another Italian community down the way doesn't have. All of these Italians are called socii, allies. That's where we get our term social, society, sociology. It all comes from the Latin word for ally. Allies don't have to pay war taxes. They don't have to pay tributum. They obviously have no political rights in Rome. Generally, they don't have commercium or connubium. Their main obligation is send troops. So they don't pay money. They may have to pay indirect taxes. If the Romans set up a toll at a harbor, the allies would have to pay that toll just as citizens do. But the main obligation that the socii have, that those allied communities have, is sending contingents of troops to serve in the Roman army. And again, that is how Rome exploits her allies. We should think of conscription as a form of exploitation. Rome exploits Italy by conscripting men from it, and that's why Rome, as it starts to confront external enemies in the Mediterranean, has such a robust manpower base to draw on, because it has a huge pool of citizens, and citizens without the vote. It has all of these Latin colonies it can draw from, and it has all of these socii, these Italian communities whose main obligation is to send troops to Rome. So those legal statuses are a key point of Rome's infrastructure of control that allows Rome to exert control by the early 3rd century BC over the Italian peninsula, at least south of the Po River Valley. All right, this has been a long video, a lot of concepts. We will talk more at the end of this week about the biggest challenge to Rome's Italian hegemony, the invasion of Italy by Pyrrhus of Epirus. So we'll talk soon.